As a child, I had an obsession with dinosaurs. By age 10, I had seen all 3 Jurassic Park films about 100 times each, had every Discovery Channel special that I could catch recorded on VHS tape, and I could spell just about any name these paleontologic word salad chefs bestowed upon these magnificent creatures. But it has been a long time since my childhood, and now when I think of the dinosaurs, it's a bit different. My mind doesn't fill with imaginative wonder at the thought of such massive life forms roaming the planet millions of years ago, and part of me blames Hollywood for sucking any nostalgia I had for one of my favorite film franchises drier than a mosquito frozen in amber. But deep down I know that's not really why I think differently of these creatures. These days, on the rare occasion that I do stop to consider the species that ruled the Earth before humans, it's more often than not about how they enjoy millions of years of adaptation, evolution, and domination over the planet, and how all of that was wiped away almost instantaneously by something as seemingly random as a meteor striking the Earth. How they were blissfully unaware to the fact that all they would ever leave behind would be puzzle pieces that would never show us the whole picture of their existence. And honestly, sometimes I get a little bit jealous. But what does this have to do with anything? Well, nothing. Nothing at all. And that's the beauty of it. Nothing ever has or ever will matter as we understand it. We as human beings have tried to rationalize this unpopular truth, but accepting it may be the best move we can make in this chess game of life. Bear with me as I try to explain the philosophy of nihilism and how to find comfort in the chaos of existence. Unlike our scaly friends from the introduction, we as humans have spent a disproportionate amount of time asking the question, how did we get here? And for all the time spent pondering that topic, we still don't have a direct answer, and we probably never will. Because of this, some of the most influential thinkers of our past have instead moved on to the question, why are we here? And surprise, surprise, we're not any closer to figuring that one out either. In the early days of civilized society, myths and religion gave us our fundamental grasp of our origins and how we should live our lives. But to the more philosophical and scientifically inclined, these answers were about as satisfactory as being a child and hearing, I don't know, ask your dad. It may have taken us a couple thousand years, but eventually we reached a period in time known as the Enlightenment, when scientific breakthroughs began to unravel the very fabric of the blanket of truth that religion used to so gently tuck humanity into bed at night, and where the seams became frayed due to the tug-of-war of scientific reason and religious faith, is where the topic of this video was conceived. God is dead, God remains dead, and we have killed him. How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderer of all murderers? What was holiest and mightiest of all that the world has yet owned has bled to death under our knives? Who will wipe this blood off us? What water is there for us to clean ourselves? What festivals of atonement, what sacred games shall we have to invent? Is not the greatness of this deed too great for us? Must we ourselves not become gods simply to appear worthy of it? This quote by German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche is one of the most known and most misunderstood quotes from any 19th century thinker. Despite what many internet edgelords believe, this statement is not a celebratory one. In fact, it's almost a eulogy for an entire era in human history. Nietzsche recognized the clash between the church and the academic community in the late 1800s, and what he saw terrified him. It also inspired the fundamentals for the philosophy he would be most associated with. So I think it's about time that we define said philosophy, and in doing so, hopefully shed a bit of light on the true meaning of this highly controversial quote. Nihilism is the idea that life has no intrinsic value, and that objective truth and morality don't exist. Or at least if they do, we as a species will never be able to fully grasp or comprehend it. Its usage has fluctuated throughout history, as most words do, starting as a Russian political movement in the mid to late 1800s, but eventually branching off into philosophical territory. At face value, it's a very contentious view to hold, and even Nietzsche himself worried about the implications of a society growing out of the moral limitations of religious scripture. Despite not being a huge fan of the church, he could still set aside his biases and recognize the utility of religion as a guiding outline for society. He feared that with the rise of logic and reason, men would regress to their base instincts. After all, if nothing matters, then everything is allowed, right? However, Nietzsche, being the total giga-chad that he was, put forth a counter to the hypothesized regression that he saw, and ironically enough, it kind of fits with the modern-day depiction of what we would call a chad. The Übermensch, in Nietzsche's mind, would be the next step for human evolution, based off of the idea that at some point in time there would be an individual who opposed incorrect and outdated ideas and formed their own truths from the foundation that everything we think we know is wrong and that we will never know, therefore creating our own values despite the dawning face of existential dread. For Nietzsche, the one who would overcome the initial despair of nihilism would be one who could forge the future in whatever way they chose. In the same way that religion was the foundation of the past, nihilism, if overcome and utilized properly as a driving force to persist and create meaning out of nothing or deconstruct outdated systems that perpetuate net suffering, could very well be the foundation of the future. Existential nihilism is a bit of an umbrella term, but one that Nietzsche's philosophy fits under quite well, despite his numerous shortcomings as a man. His conflicted hatred for religion, his problematic ideas on women and race, and his complete mental breakdown near the end of his life made Nietzsche one of those people that couldn't really practice what he preached. While Nietzsche himself fell victim to the overwhelming hopelessness and despair that unconquered nihilism can bring, I don't think this should discredit the good ideas put forth in his works. After all, the Christian Bible as we know it today is still one of the most highly regarded books in existence, and I'm pretty sure its modern form was written by a pedophile. Nihilism as a construct is one widely understood to be, well, pointless, and to the extent that we shouldn't succumb to the depressing reality of our current model for existence, I agree. The existential nihilist, at least in my interpretation, is a person who has taken the bitter pill of truth, fought through its more severe side effects, and come out on the other side as a stronger, wiser, and more self-realized individual. None of this is to say that existential nihilism, as we've been discussing, is the perfect way to live your life or view the world. Just like with any ideology, it can be misinterpreted and taken to extremes. And with an idea so contentious to the very hardwiring of our being, it's certainly not for everyone. But hopefully this video has shed some light on the origins and usefulness of nihilism in a postmodern world. There's a lot of misconception and misinformation on the topic spread around all over the internet, and it seems to me that the general understanding of the philosophy doesn't extend past the face value edgy teenage phase. So at the very least, I wanted to make an attempt to show it from my perspective. As someone who falls into the existentialist school of thought, and has read a bit of Sartre, a little bit of Kierkegaard, and a lot of Nietzsche, I can only truly speak to my experiences, but I can also inform those experiences with the ideas that men like the aforementioned have put forward. I've certainly struggled with the thoughts that come with the uncertainty of life, and I would never claim to have all my shit figured out, no matter how many or how few books I've read. But as odd as it may seem, knowing that the closest thing we have to real truth is that none of this really matters in the end, is the best way I know to find comfort in the chaos.